Hello, fifth grade. I hope that you are excited to start doing some sculpting with clay today. We're going to start building our clay containers that look like an item of food based off of the artist Claes Oldenburg. So let's talk about the materials that we have to get started with today. So I have one of the mess mats on the table to try and keep that clay dust contained in one spot. I have a container of slip. This is clay mixed with water, and this will act as our glue when we are building. I also have a wooden skewer. I do have a rolling pin. I have a paper towel here, which I'll talk about in a couple minutes. And then of course I have the clay. So the clay that we are using is special clay. It will go into the kiln in order to be fired and permanently harden, so we'll never be able to get it back to this soft clay after it has gone into the kiln. But kiln fired clay has a few things that we need to do before we work with it, and a few things that make it different from air dry clay. The first thing that we have to do when we're using clay like this, we have to wedge it. Wedging it is kneading the clay in order to remove air bubbles, which is an incredibly important step. So to wedge the clay, all you really have to do, since we won't have that much at a time, is just squish it together in your hands for at least 30 seconds. While you are doing this, you might even hear some air bubbles popping in the clay. That is a good thing. If you don't hear them, that's totally fine. But this is an incredibly important step to take before working with the clay. If air bubbles remain trapped in the clay, the kiln does not like that, and your project might get potentially damaged. Obviously, we do not want that to happen. So I'm going to do this for just a couple more seconds. All right, and I think we'll be good to start off with. And yes, your hands are going to get messy. It's okay, just accept it and move on. All right, so we are doing two different types of building for this project. We're going to use slabs, and we're also going to use coils. We are going to start with the slabs first. So I am going to take about half of my clay. I know I don't need the entire thing. I'm gonna set the other half off to the side, and I am going to get this clay at least a little bit flatter, so it's going to be easier to use the rolling pin. All right, and then you wanna take either a piece of paper towel or one of the pieces of canvas, whichever one is better for you, and you want to put it down on your mat. The clay can be very sticky, and we don't want it to stick to the mat when you are rolling it out. So I'm going to go ahead and roll it out. We want to make sure that the clay does not get too thin. I also recommend, after you take a couple rolls, flip it over. If any paper towel does get stuck in the clay, that's okay. Not a big deal. And if you happen to see any air bubbles, like I saw a little one, I'm gonna take my skewer and pop it. That is not your bell. That just happened while I was filming. Sorry, guys. All right, so again, little air bubble, that's okay. Maybe I need it to wedge for longer, but at least I'm seeing it now. And again, not a big deal if paper towel gets stuck to the clay. We will not even see that by the time that we are done. All right, so I'm gonna do a quick comparison so you can see about how thick I have my slab. It's just a little bit skinnier than my finger. We don't want it to get any skinnier than that. So since I have my slab rolled out, I'm going to take my skewer and I am going to use this to cut out the shape that is going to be the bottom of my container. Now we're all making different things. Some of us might have a rectangle, some of us might have a circle to start it off with. I'm going to have a triangle since I'm making a piece of pie for my container. I am going to sketch it out lightly, just like you would with a pencil. You don't want to cut into it all the way right away. So we also don't want these to be that big, so I'm happy with this. The next thing that we're going to do is cut it out. When you're cutting it out, you want to hold the skewer straight up and down so that you get a nice clean edge. Otherwise, your edges are going to be tilted, and I don't think we want that to happen. You can go ahead and pull the extra clay up like that. this is my slab for the base. I'm gonna go ahead and set that right there. Now we want to make a second one of these because we want one for the base, but then we also want one for the lid, right? So I'm gonna set that over here off to the side, and now I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna speed through this part, but I'm gonna roll out another slab and get it ready to go. And then we'll talk about how to make sure that we are getting it to be the same size. All right, so I have a slab, and I know some of you are probably super annoyed by paper towel if you're using that. Once again, ignore the bell. I'm having bad luck with this today. The paper towel is actually gonna burn off in the kiln and it's not gonna damage your clay whatsoever, so it really is okay. Try not to let it bother you. All right, to make sure that these things are the same size, I am going to just lay my bottom slab directly on top of my new slab, and I am going to trace it. Easy, right? If you are worried about any clay sticking together, you can separate them with a piece of paper towel. But since we are not attaching them, we're just laying them, it should be absolutely a-okay. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and peel that off. I am going to lay my other slab directly next to my first one, and I'm gonna ditch the paper towel for now because it is starting to get a little bit damp from the clay. All right, so I have my two pieces right here. You can use either one since they are the same exact size. What we want to do next, we want to start rolling out our coils that we're going to use to build the walls of our container. So in order to do that, you're not going to need to roll out all the clay at once. That would just be crazy. I'm going to grab a little piece right here. You can start it off by rolling it in between your hands if you would like to, but then otherwise you want to roll it back and forth on your mat until you get a snake shape. And I actually still think that's going to be more clay than I need. All right, so you want to roll back and forth all the way until it is about the same thickness the whole way down. All right, now our pieces are not that big, so I'm going to do a little comparison again. Just put my finger right here. My coil is a little bit thinner than my finger. So you don't want them to be super teeny tiny. Those are going to break really easily. You just want them to be thin enough to be able to move easily and to be able to set onto your bottom slab. So here's what we're going to do. I rolled out this nice long coil. I won't need the whole thing, but I am going to see exactly how much of this coil I'm actually going to need to use. Notice I'm not breaking the coil at my corners. I want to use the same coil for the entire first layer. It will be much stronger that way. All right, I'm gonna stick those corners together. All right, now we know that if we just stick those pieces together, it's not going to be super secure. You do have to attach pieces of clay together in a series of a few steps, what I call the 4 S's. So the first step that you are going to do is called score, and you're going to take the skewer for that one, and anywhere that the 2 pieces of clay are touching, you are going to make a series of small marks all the way around. And I'm going to do that on my slab, and I am also going to do that on my coil. I know you probably feel like, okay, that feels like it's gonna take a really long time, but guys, this is not a step that we can skip. Your piece might fall apart if you skip it. All right, the second step, the second S, is slip. So for this special clay that goes into the kiln, we have clay that is mixed with water for our slip, and this acts as our glue. So you can use one of the popsicle sticks to spread out the slip, or you can just use your finger. Personally, I think I'm already making a mess. Why not just keep going with that? So you want to spread a little bit of slip over your score marks, again, on both pieces of clay that you are attaching. So that way they are ready for the third S, which is stick. So I am just going to flip this over, center it the best that I can, and really stick them together. All right, and then the fourth S is always important because you might notice you got a little bit of slip oozing out from the side. The fourth S is smooth, so that is a great time to go ahead, use your fingers, smooth it over. Since many of us probably do not want to see the coils by the time that we are done, it is a great idea to smooth that seam out so it looks like one solid piece of clay. And the clay should be nice and soft, especially when we're first working on it. So it should be very easy to just smooth over with your fingers. You don't want to layer a bunch of slip or a bunch of water onto it rather. That will make it break down too much. All right, so I have my first coil added on right here. I'm gonna go ahead and add on maybe 2 or 3 more coils, get those slipped and scored on here, and then we will check back again in just a moment. All right, everybody, so I have gone ahead and added some more coils. That is about as tall as I want it to be. My coils are not perfectly smooth, and that's okay. There is still time to fix that. However, the last thing I want to show you for today is how to also finish off with your lid and make sure that it fits in a way where it's not gonna move around and just fall off. So I have my slab right here. I had it so that this side was laying up before, but I looked at the other side, decided it was a little bit cleaner, so that's the one. I'm gonna use the other side for the top. All right, so first, of course, make sure that it's a good fit. If it's a little bit too big, you can always just trim it with the skewer. If it's too small, you can just cut a new one and just place, your bottom part on top of your clay with some paper towel for protection, and just make sure that you have one that fits. So I want you to imagine when this is dry, because the clay is still wet, it does kind of stay on there. But after we have fired these and glazed these, the lid might just move around like that. So something that you can do, you can put a small coil on the inside of your lid to help keep it in place, keep the lid in place, excuse me. So you can make this coil a little bit smaller than your other ones because you want to make sure that it has a good fit and that it's not taking up too much space. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of just size that out really quick. That actually ended up being a really good size. Okay, so again, this is just a good option to make sure that your lid fits on here. So I'm gonna go ahead and slip and score that on there, and then we'll make sure we understand how to store these until we work on them next time. All right, so I attached my coil. I smoothed it out as much as I can just for today. So the really important thing about this clay is that we want them to be able to dry together. Yeah, we want them to be able to dry together, which means we want the lid to be on here. So if you're worried about the clay sticking, you are, once again, just gonna grab a paper towel. I'm gonna rip that in half so the paper towel is not too thick. And I'm gonna rip that in half again, I'll be honest. All right, you don't need much. Maybe grab a paper towel and share it with someone else at your table. So I'm just gonna lay the paper towel on top of my container, and then I am going to set my lid right on top so that they fit together. And I know that looks absolutely ridiculous right now, but you can see my lid fits on top with just a little paper towel sandwich. So we'll leave it here for today. We will talk about adding details and getting these finished up next time.